You guys see this? Does it look cool? Oh no, maybe back here. There you go. So my good buddies at Iron Age Audio Works just sent me not 1, but 8 of these new units to try out. And all they said was make something cool with it. Is this the hidden gem? Is this the best gear purchase of this year or next year? Is this the best mic pre that money can buy? Well, this video is definitively going to answer that. We're gonna have a lot of fun doing it. So let me set this guy down. So recently I made a video about the 500 series chassis and what it means to me. I didn't know what I was gonna put in it just yet, but then of course, right around the corner, Iron Age responded to me from NAM and they wanted to send me over some units. Now, off the top of my head, I can think of a handful of absolute legends that were iconic because they did their own thing. Neve, API, SSL, Avalon, Universal Audio all had their own designs, their own sound, and now Iron Age Audio Works. Just listen to it. Just listen to the sustain. It's got sustain for days. It's not a guitar, we can't do that. This is the Iron Age Audio Works 622. It has a console-style input stage with a Jensen transformer input, 64 decibels of awesome op-amp gain, a 20 dB mic pad, a 6 dB line pad, a 60 Hz high-pass filter, a VCA-style compressor with a feed-forward and feedback-style selection switch. Too cool, it's like having 2 compressors in one. The output stage is a 3-band swinging input console-style inductor EQ with 15 decibels of boost or cut. And finally, worth mentioning, a CineMag output transformer. Now that's just kind of the broad overview. Iron Age has done a great job of just including so much information on their website, links in the description. They've got the block diagram for people like me, nerdy people who like reading that kind of stuff. But for now, we're gonna keep the technicals pretty short and sweet. Now I gotta say, I'm getting some very console vibes with this thing. We've got ourselves a mini 622 console right here, and we're gonna put it through its paces. I'm gonna show you how. So first off, drums. So since we're gonna track this song with nothing but the 622, and I only have 8 of them, to get a really full mix for our drum kit, we're gonna have to get really creative with how we approach tracking drums. So here it is. First, the base layer of the shell pass. Now, if you haven't heard of a shell pass, go check out Bobby Huff's channel. So to do this method, we are going to have 2 overhead mics, 2 room mics, and then we're gonna start miking individual pieces of the drums. We're gonna first start off with a kick and snare pass where you play the whole song with nothing but the kick and the snare. We're gonna have a kick in, a kick out, snare top, snare bottom. Then we're gonna replay that entire pass, but without the kick and snare. And now we're gonna add in the toms. So we'll have 1 tom, 2 tom, and we'll still have the rooms to blend in. Then we're gonna replay that pass a 3rd time, and it's gonna be just the hi-hat and just the cymbals. This is going to allow us to get not only a really controlled, detailed mix when we go to mix down, but it's also going to enable us to hear what every type of source on the drum kit sounds like through just the 622. Then of course, from there, we're gonna go through the rest of our signals. We're gonna go through a DI bass and a bass amp. We're also gonna do some traditional acoustic guitar techniques that I like to employ. We're gonna also do electric guitar, and we cannot forget about the line switch on this thing. So we're gonna take some keys sounds and some synth sounds out of the box, in the box, go out of the box into the line input and see what that does to it as well. And then last but not least, we're also going to make sure that we cover vocals. Now that we have our approach and you guys know how we're gonna tackle this project, let's first hear a snippet of what we came up with, the finished product, and then we'll deep dive all the signal sources so you guys can get a sense of what these guys are really capable of and what they sound like. Here it is.
Sometimes I win and then sometimes I lose. And in that moment when I'm low, the future's fading, lost control.
All right, so that was a quick look at the making of. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Big thank you to Josh at Sugar Creek. Had a lot of fun over the weekend doing that, and thank you for your help. And also a big thank you to Taylor Chambliss for letting us use your kit. And honestly, it was just great to hang out with my brother Chris and Josh and just have some fun creating something and seeing what we get. So what you heard was the entire mix run through the 2-bus print of the 622 as like a master bus, master compressor kind of setup. So we're gonna deep dive the mix real quick. So the first thing to note is the mix. There are no plugins really in this session. The only plugins that really appear is a little bit of tuning on the bass from when it fell out of tune a bit while we were tracking. Some reverb and effects, really just very light. We've got a few different reverbs, a few different delays, and then on one of the harmonies tracks, we have a Studio D doing its thing, but that's really about it, with the exception of the lead vocal. I didn't want to commit too early to too much heavy-handed compression, so I just kind of backed off, knowing that that would be the exception in this mix. So outside of that, everything else was the 622 pre's, EQs, and compression. At the beginning, when I said this was like a mini 622 console, I treated it that way while we were tracking just to see what kind of result we would get, and I think it came out really well. Let me know in the comments. Now let's break down some of these signal sources and see what it sounds like on its own. So the first thing that I want to look at is the synth tracks and the synth layers in the first verse. So now these synth layers were something that I already had created with the sounds in Luna, and I came to the session with them knowing that I would print through the line ins and see what that sounded like. Now the unit doesn't have any gain on the line ins, it's just line level, and then you can run it through the EQ and compression. So what I did is I switched it to mic mode, and the cool thing is that when you put the pad on, it gets you a lot closer to that line level. So I flipped them into mic mode and I drove the signals a bit harder, through a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ, and we're gonna do the AB real quick. So here's the original synth sounds before hitting the 622s. And here is the after. What does the 622 do to these sounds? Super cool. So obviously when we added some gain to it, that was kind of a mixed decision. We kind of wanted to bring some of those elements to life, add some more grit and texture. It also added a bit of depth and dimension when we added the compressor on, rolled back some of the high-end EQ, pushed some of the mids. Sounded really, really great. Next, let's take a look at the drums. Now remember, we did these drums in shell passes and cymbal passes separately, so the first 8 tracks are just kick and snare, with the overheads and the rooms. So here's the first pass on its own. Super cool, tons of character in that sound. Now we had a kick in mic, we had a kick out. So let's take a listen to those 2 sources and see what that sounds like. Let me turn my groups off. Let's listen to just the kick in. Here's the kick out. Now let's listen to the snare top. Let's listen to the snare bottom. Now let's listen to just the kick and snare on its own. Now let's listen to just the overheads. Cool. Here's the rooms. A lot of character in those rooms, and that's thanks in large part to the VCA compressors. We were just cranking them and seeing what they could do. Now I know they actually could have went a lot further, but I liked how they sounded there. And once again, here is the whole signal. Now after that, we did do a tom pass, so let's take a look at the toms and what they sounded like. Now we kept the overheads and we kept the room mics, but we took away the snares, we took away the snare mics, and we took away the kick mics, and then swapped it out for the toms. So let's take a listen to just the toms. Cool. Now let's add back in the rest of the kit. This was a creative decision to track this way. I really wanted to be able to throw all signals at these things to see how they handled them. So that's kind of why we did it that way, to control the room and the sound, to have that really nice flexibility in post-production. So let's break this down even further. Here are just the direct toms. Cool, they sound really nice. Here's just the overhead of the toms. Very cool. Now let's listen to the overheads for the cymbal pass, which would have just been a direct hi-hat mic, and then the overheads, and then the room mics. So here's just the hi-hat. Now with the hi-hat, I had to swap out a mic. The EQ for that particular hi-hat, didn't really do well in my opinion. And as an engineer, in that moment, I would have normally reached for a different hi-hat had we had that on site, but we didn't. So now let's listen to the overheads on their own. Very nice. Those overheads are ribbon microphones, so they're going to be a lot darker in color, which I think is usually helpful. Usually gets a nice balanced tone when you're playing drums. So now here is the room. Now let's throw everything in it. Here is the entire drum kit. Let's listen to it. Overall, I think that it came out really well. I think that might have been Chris's first time tracking drums that way, and I think he did a great job. Now we did do some special processing to the drums. We added a sidechain drum bus, and to do that we had to first track all of our drums, of course. Then the second thing that we did was we added just a gritty, drivey drum sound by also printing through the 622s. So let's take a listen to those two on their own as well. Here is the drum sidechain. Now what I used this for was to add some brightness and attack kind of back in and kind of bring it up in the mix a little bit to kind of bring that brightness back out of the drums. So here it is on its own. Now, let's add it in with the mix. Let's first start by not having it in. Here it is without the sidechain. So you can definitely tell it makes a big difference, and there's a lot of character in the drums once you really process it with that sidechain. The compressor on this circuit really sounded great for that. Now here is the distorted drum sound. In order to do this, there's no output control on the 622, and that might be the only kind of consideration that I have on this thing. That it's the only thing that it's necessarily missing, but it's not the end of the world. All we did is run it into something else to be able to control the gain. Specifically, we ran it into the Universal Audio 710D, and there was no compression on it. There was no nothing. It was just literally like a pad almost. So here's the sound on its own. Really cool. The snare sounds epic when it's distorted that way. So let's listen to what it sounds like with the rest of the drums. And we'll again first start off by having it turned off. So here it is. Really brings the snare drum to life and overall kind of adds this mid-range back into the whole kit sound. So overall sounds really cool. Next, let's take a look at the bass. Now the bass guitar, what we did with that is we took a DI and we DI'd directly into the 622. We simultaneously split the signal at the guitar level. We ran a separate send to an amp with a fuzz pedal. And this is what it sounds like. Now here's just the bass DI on its own. A lot of the meat and potatoes of the bass sound comes from this particular track, and a lot of the bottom end and beef comes from this. It's got a nice attack to it. It's got this really cool mid-rangey thing going on, so it actually will sit in a mix really well. And then of course we took it a step further and we added the distorted amp sound. Here's that. Now, of course, that has a bit of low end in it as well, but it's also really compressed. So it kind of adds some more sustain, and then of course a bit more mid-range and saturation so that you can hear it on different sets of speakers. Now let's take a look at the acoustic guitar. This is where this preamp really shines for me, at least. Not all preamps sound great with any guitar. Now this particular guitar is an Epiphone Hummingbird style guitar, a very bright sounding acoustic guitar. Now what we did with this as far as processing is we put a little bit of compression. Again, you go all the way counterclockwise and you get a great result. I would equate it to what your ears would hear if you were in that room. Very nice, very natural sound. Here it is. Very clear, very transparent sounding acoustic guitar track. Sounds wonderful. Now let's take a look at these electric guitars here. These are two Tellys. One's a little dirty on the left side, one's distorted on the right side. And again, transparent, clear sound. This preamp handles distorted guitars really well as clean guitars too. So really cool. Let's listen to it. Nice mid-range on that. Sounds really cool. Let's move on to the lead sounds. No real thoughts on that. I think it sounds great. All right, so now let's take a look at the vocals here. So this is the lead vocal sound, and the only thing we did to that in post was just add some compression. Pretty well-known trick that a lot of pros do, you know, the 1176 into the LA2A. When I was tracking Chris sing, he's a very powerful singer, and so I didn't want to over-compress him on the front side, so that was kind of the creative decision and a engineering decision not to use all of the compression capabilities of what the 622 had to offer. I didn't want to commit to that sound too early, so that's the only reason we're doing it in the box. And I definitely could have compressed him with the 622. It was just a choice. So I wasn't gonna do that for this particular session. But let's take a listen to this. And you can see the chain here is just LA2A and 1176. And then, of course, we have a bit of tuning here. I haven't gotten around to melodyning it yet, so I've kind of just got something as a placeholder. But let's take a listen here.
I've been a dreamer. I've been a fool. Sometimes I play it safe. Sometimes I break the rules. When the darkest night, it has me headed for cover. The thunder's beating down, yeah, weight on my shoulders.
So overall, this preamp did really well on a vocal. It was really easy to set my level, add a little bit of EQ flavor where I wanted it, and just dial in the right amount of compression. Or, of course, you could always just not have compression and handle it in post. The thing that I particularly loved about this particular preamp is that it wasn't harsh at all in the top end. A lot of times you'll find that some preamps become pretty brittle, and then you got to do a lot of de-essing. I did zero de-essing in this particular track. So, of course, if I really boosted the treble band on it, if I really boosted the highs, I probably would have to de-ess. But I found that it just sounded so pleasing without it that I didn't really worry about it. I think that that's something that this preamp really, really shines at, is how easy it is to work with, whether it be a vocal, an acoustic guitar. It did particularly well with this vocal, so that I'm really happy about that. There was no de-essing needed. I thought that it sounded really good as is. Now, of course, I also did some background vocals, and anyone who knows me knows that I really am a huge fan of Mutt Lange and Def Leppard and what they do. So this is how the background vocals sound, and it's just me paying homage to that. So.
Whoa, wow, life, I keep living. I've been running like a train off track. Whoa, time it keeps ticking, but it's all I have. I'm living, never looking back.
All right, so that was a lot of fun doing that, but there's no tuning. That's just straight mic, straight into preamp. Again, I'm really, really happy with how the top end came out. It doesn't build up, at least it didn't seem to build up. The saturation's really nice there, so overall you get an incredible vocal sound out of one of these things, and couldn't be happier about that, and it was really easy to get to that point too. And then of course from here, if I'm doing stuff in the box, if I want to use FabFilter and, you know, kind of go crazy, do some fine tuning, this is the perfect starting point for that. So incredibly easy to use for vocals. All right, so let's throw our effects back in and see what the vocals sound like with the effects here.
The thunder's beating down, yeah, weight on my shoulders. I'm not giving up, never giving in. Oh, life, I keep living it. I've been running like a train off track. Whoa, time, it keeps ticking, but it's all I have. I'm living, never looking back.
Awesome, so you hear that cool EP34, the Echoplex style plugin, getting some grit and distortion on that delay. It sounds really, really cool, really killer. All right, so let's bring it full circle here. What do I think of this preamp 622 by Iron Age? The first thought that comes to mind is it's an absolute must-have of this next year for me personally. I don't get to keep any of these units, so I'm definitely gonna try to pick up one of these. One of my favorite things about this preamp is just how easy it was to use. It never got in the way. I didn't find myself struggling to find where I wanted to set the pre. The EQ was really pleasing no matter what way I kind of pushed it. And the compressor was one of my favorite features. It just was so easy. Just leave it counterclockwise and it worked well on pretty much everything, unless you really wanted that dynamic range. Even leaving it on just all the way left made a really cool sound. So super easy to use. On my channel, I get a lot of people that ask me questions, you know, like with regards to gain staging and things that you kind of struggle with at the beginning side of your engineering career or the beginning stages of if you're an artist trying to track your own music at home. And I think that this is not only a great product for professional engineers, it sounds incredible, but for someone who's fresh to recording and just getting into outboard gear, this one is a must-have for you guys. It's incredibly easy to use. I cannot stress that enough. Of course, the build quality is fantastic. Looks incredibly killer. I think it's one of the coolest 500 series units out there. It's just got this nice matte gray finish with cool color schemes. So what more could you really want? Now, drawbacks. I didn't really have any negative things to say about this, so I had to really struggle to try to come up with something. And the only thing that I could think of that could make this unit a lot better, right, is if they could find some way to fit some sort of like maybe an output control so that I could drive much harder into the output stage when I want to get that really overdriven sound. That would be a huge plus because they fit absolutely everything else into this device, which is another reason why I highly recommend it as a must-have for this year and next year and the years to come. It's just got everything in there. So really, really great channel strip, really great preamp. The only other thing that I could really think of, and this is just something that I noticed. So since I created a console and all the channel strips were right next to each other, the one thing that I noticed is that the 48 volts switch is right next to the next channel's mic selector, and I could see myself maybe having like an oops moment and turning on 48 volts where I shouldn't have it turned on. So maybe drop the 48 volts low and put a different switch above it. Just swap that around. I don't know if that's possible, but accidents happen. So that's just one of the things I noticed. Again, I had to really nitpick to come up with those. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video whatsoever, please give it a like, leave a comment below, let me know what you think of the song, let me know what you think of the units, and subscribe to the channel for more. This unit is available at Iron Age's website. It's out now, so feel free, click the link in the description and go check it out, go pick one up. You're gonna absolutely love it if you get it. If you'd like to support the channel further, go to thestevekinney.com. I have my Heritage Classics and my Console Classics packs, which you can pick up. It's a great way to show support to the channel. You can also schedule one-on-one time with me. I love connecting with everyone from this community that I've been building over the last year. It's been really cool meeting some of you, and I look forward to meeting others in the community as well. So thanks so much to everyone who's watched this video and made it this far. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.